All right, everyone, get your knives out because we got to really get through The Walking Dead because, well, this is The Last of Us.
No, I am the Father.
And here we go.
That belongs in a museum.
Are you telling me that you built a time machine? Out of a DeLorean?
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
This is Sparta!
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Dr. Grant, my dear Dr. Sattler, welcome to Jurassic Park.
Welcome back to another episode of Easily Entertained. I'm your host, Bryson Olson. Here we talk about all things entertainment. It's been a couple weeks because we're into like the second, well, I think we're into the third week of January, actually. We skipped the first 2 weeks, which I am sorry. That wasn't initially my intention to skip those first 2 weeks. However, things were very busy with work and school and stuff, and they still kind of are. However, we're working through things now, so we're vibing. So yeah, we kind of skipped that, but Happy New Year, everyone. I hope you guys have had a fantastic start to your 2023. It is January, so you may just be kind of lulled out a little bit. So I can relate because I'm the same way. January and December, I feel like, are the worst months for me because they're just so busy and so stressful. I totally get it. It's kind of a rough time, but it's okay. You know, we're vibing. We're back with the podcast. It's great. I am on another podcast. If you guys want to check that out, it's called The Periodic Review. I do it with one of my coworkers and some of his old coworkers. We're all friends now, but we all do that. It's called The Periodic Review. It's super fun. Y'all should go check it out. It is available on Spotify and on YouTube. Yeah, it's pretty great. So today we have a couple things that we'll talk about. I think first I want to talk about the Knives Out sequel, Glass Onion, that's what it was called, with Daniel Craig as a star. You have Edward Norton in it and a couple other people. That one was really good. Then we're going to talk about the new Walking Dead season because it came out on Netflix recently, and it is the final season of The Walking Dead. They just had waited to put that on Netflix, but now we have that. And I watched that and I thought it was pretty good. It was a good end to the series, I think. And then lastly, we are going to talk about The Last of Us premiere because that did happen yesterday as of recording this. So yeah, I want to talk about that. And I have some interesting things to say about it, I think. But first, let's talk about Glass Onion, which is the sequel to Knives Out, which I'm sure a lot of people have seen or hopefully have seen. And that one was a really good one. It's a mystery, and it stars Daniel Craig. Let's talk about the first one. Anyways, the first one, it stars Daniel Craig, who is a detective. He's like a Southern detective. His name is Benoit Blanc. You have Chris Evans. You have Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Jamie Lee Curtis, Anna de Armas. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. I don't know. But there are a lot of good ones in that movie. And so it's like a mystery, and you have the detective, Benoit Blanc. He's trying to figure out why someone had been supposedly murdered or killed themselves. And so, yeah, it was a pretty interesting one. And so this is the sequel to that, called Glass Onion. And this one stars Daniel Craig again. He's back. So it's still Benoit Blanc. I think they're going to make this more of a series. I'm not entirely sure. But it stars him. It stars Edward Norton, Catherine Hayne, Jessica Henwick, Kate Hudson, Madeline Klein, Dave Bautista's in it, Leslie Odom Jr., Ethan Hawke's in it, but he's barely in it for like a very brief time. And then another main character is Janelle Monáe. I think that's how you pronounce her name. She was in Hidden Figures. I recognized her as soon as she came on screen. I was like, oh, that's where I know her from. She's awesome. She's great. But so in this one, it's a different story. So it's pretty much all different people. I was almost expecting it to be the same people from the first one, but the only person who's the same is Daniel Craig as the detective, which I do think is good because this is more about him, and it's about him like uncovering everything and solving the mystery. So in this one, the Glass Onion is this like sort of resort that they go to that Miles Braun, who's played by Edward Norton, he's like this billionaire in this movie. So it's his like resort, and all these people were invited to go to solve a made up murder mystery of his murder. But what ends up happening is Dave Bautista's character gets murdered, because he gets like poisoned. And so with that, this turns into like an actual murder mystery. So it was pretty interesting in that respect. And you're like, everyone has motives because this billionaire, he sued Andy Brand. So him and another character, Andy Brand, who's played by Janelle Monáe, they had like a business idea together. But due to some falling outs, they had to go their separate ways, and there was a lawsuit about it. And Miles Braun won like everything essentially. And it was kind of like a crazy ordeal because everyone in like the friend group turned against Andy. So they all sided with Miles, because like Catherine Haynes' character is a governor. The Leslie Odom Jr., he's a scientist. There's a fashion guru sort of thing. And they have Dave Bautista, who's like a Twitch star, and he wants to do like news and stuff, and he wants to do media and that kind of stuff. But so they all kind of sided with Miles, and so they had this big falling out. And so all these characters, they get invited to this island resort for this murder mystery party, essentially. And Andy ends up showing up, which not everyone expected. So that kind of adds some tension going. And she is going throughout most of the time being like, hey, you guys all suck. Why did you side with Miles when you know I should be accredited for most of the success that has happened? But so that was a pretty interesting part of it, because you can feel all this tension, and you kind of think that Miles is actually going to die because he's going to fake his own murder for them to solve. But Benoit Blanc, the detective, he figures it out immediately. He didn't even have to have him murdered to know. He just was that observant. So he kind of ruins the mystery and whatever. But then Dave Bautista's character dies. And so now they have to solve who killed him and why. And so it turns out they're actually faking it, because Andy is not really Andy. She's her sister, who I don't remember the name of. Helen Brand. There we go. Because they're like twins. But so basically she wants to get revenge on all these people. She wants to find out who killed Andy, because she had found Andy's body at her house earlier, like a month ago or something like that. And so they were trying to figure out who did it. And so I don't want to spoil too much, because if you haven't seen it, I feel like you should. It's a very good mystery movie. But it's kind of obvious who it ends up being, and I don't know. I like the mystery stuff because I feel like you really get to be engaged, because I think that's the nice thing about mystery stories is you're trying to figure it out just as much as the characters are trying to figure out. You're like, okay, so they have motive. They could have been there at this time. What would they have used? Is there evidence for that? Does the movie show that? And I think that's like a really good way of the show don't tell rule, which, if you guys don't know, show don't tell is particularly like a film and like theater concept, but it's kind of, you can kind of relate it to any art medium, really. Show don't tell means to, like, literally, you show it to us, you don't tell us what happened. You give like active examples So I think like a good example of the show don't tell rule is in like WALL-E. You can tell that these two characters, these two little robots, are having a love story. They're not telling you that they're having a love story and that they like each other. They're showing you through their actions. WALL-E clearly is obsessed with Eve from the get-go. He's like, oh my gosh, there's this beautiful robot. I'm going to do things for her. And Eve doesn't really care. And so like you see the progression as actions get applied to that. And it shows that they like each other in the end. And they're not like, hey, I like you. No, they show that. And I think that is a good rule of thumb. And in mysteries, typically you want to do that because you don't want to be actively like, oh, it could have been Miles. He had motive. They had a lawsuit and he could have just shot her and, made it out to look like a suicide, whatever. And so like with mysteries, you really have to use that show don't tell rule so that you don't give it away. And I think that's what I really liked about Glass Onion. I thought that was great because, that's what you want in a mystery. You want to figure it out yourself too. I know I'm always going through mysteries and I'm like, who did it? And then sometimes I'm right and sometimes I'm so wrong. Who did I think it was going to be in this movie? I can't remember. I thought it was going to be, strangely, Andy, actually from the get-go. I thought like she was going to play it off like she is angry, but like we're going to be like, oh, she's just like hurt that all this happened, and then it was going to actually be her. And then we find out later that it wasn't her, and there was this whole plot with her and Benoit to try and like figure out which of this friend group did this. And so I did like that. It kind of subverted my expectations a little bit. And it's like, I feel like it could have been anybody, like who it ends up being. I was like, oh yeah, well that makes sense. That was kind of like almost the obvious choice, which is probably why I didn't go for it. But sometimes the most obvious choice is the right answer. So yeah, but Glass Onion, Knives Out Mystery, is a solid film. I'd say a pretty good 8 out of 10, I think. I think that's a pretty good one. All right, next up, the final season of The Walking Dead. What season was this? 12 or 11? I don't know. Actually, look, there is so many, which kind of brings me to a weird point of if TV shows should actually be super long in terms of like how many seasons they get. Because if you think of like Supernatural, that one, man, someone just turned on their their shower and that's super loud. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but I definitely did. But so anyways, sorry. Some TV shows, they get really long seasons. Not really long seasons. They get a lot of seasons. So they have a really long runtime. So if you think like Shameless, you get 11 seasons. Supernatural had like 14. Let's see. The Walking Dead had 11. They were on their 11th season. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like TV shows should be a little bit shorter in terms of their runtime. Like if you think of like Stranger Things, they're only planned for 5 seasons, and I think that's all they want to do. They're going to have a complete over-encompassing story because the next season will be the last one. And I usually think that is a better way to go with shows because you don't have to make a huge storyline. I do understand that a lot of these ones that have had like really long runtimes don't always have overarching stories, which is fine. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because usually you have different little story plots that come up and you tackle different issues at different times. But I think having a show have an overall story is better so I think like a good example of like just random plots is Supernatural and The Walking Dead as well. Well, let's talk about The Walking Dead because that's what I want to talk about anyways. So The Walking Dead hasn't always had the same overarching story the entire time, which is okay. It's a long-running series, and, it's hard to make a one plot run for 11 years. And so, I totally get that. But so, because they've had, the plots with the prison, and then they have Alexandria, and then the Kingdom, and then the Whisperers, and then in this one they have the Commonwealth. So I find it kind of interesting to have long runtimes for shows, because you don't end up having a completely consistent story, I would say. It can be good. I love The Walking Dead. I thought it was great. But because I think especially for rewatchability, it's so hard to rewatch a really long show because there's so much that you have to consume. I loved Supernatural. I haven't finished it. I'm so many seasons behind. But every time a new season comes out, and I think this is also a TV versus streaming thing, because we get all the season at once, usually with streaming services, depending on the one it is. But then that means you have to wait until the next one comes out. And so I think with really long shows, you end up getting to the point where you kind of have forgotten what the heck happened. And you may remember bits and pieces, but you don't remember everything. And I think that's where long-running TV shows kind of rely on broken up story plots and changing things, because people have forgotten what has happened, so we need to change things to grab their attention. Because if something goes wrong, so say in The Walking Dead, we have a major end of the season and people die and whatever, and that's how they're going to start off the next season. They're going to start it off like that, and then they're going to completely change the topic. And I don't think that's bad necessarily. So, for example, The Walking Dead, the final season, at the beginning of it, they're kind of feeling all the repercussions from the Whisperers, which were the characters who, wow, that was an interesting sound my body just made. But the Whisperers were characters who dressed up as zombies and hid among zombie swarms, and they would lead zombies to attack different settlements and stuff like that. And so they were kind of dealing with the repercussions of that. Their towns, their settlements, Hilltop and Alexandria, are all broken because of all this damage that had happened before. But so with that, it did kind of work in their favor, because that gave them a new story plot when they discovered a new settlement called the Commonwealth. And with this, they were like, oh, we can enter an agreement and they will mutually benefit each other. And then you find out that the Commonwealth is actually pretty corrupt, and they're way more like the old world, and things aren't really fair. You get a lot of classist type systems instead of everyone working together. And so I did find that kind of interesting in that respect. However, I still wonder what it would have been if there was an overarching story overall of The Walking Dead. And I think especially because with this kind of show, we lose characters a lot. We lost Rick and Carl and Abraham, and I'm trying to think of all the characters because there's so many. But I think that's another issue with a long-running show. There are so many characters, and it's kind of hard to follow all of them and give them all screen time, which in this case is why they kind of kill some off, is so they can end contracts with actors and so that they can change plots and stuff like that. But I don't know. But anyways, The Walking Dead last season, I thought it was pretty good. I thought the idea of them getting kind of back to normal life and realizing that they're now remembering what normal life was like. Because in this, they find a new settlement. It's called the Commonwealth, and they have a really good setup, basically. And so they join, and they all get jobs. Like Daryl becomes like a soldier, and is used to like police and defend the settlement. And they have builders, and they have like a cake shop and doctors and everything. So it's like almost like a piece of the old world. However, that's a bad thing that they show, which I think kind of is a good thing that they did this, because they show that the current world we live in sucks. We have a classist system, and it's very bad. Because in the show, they were like, oh, the governor is it's almost like a dictatorship. It's technically not, but it feels like a dictatorship. They have made it so like the governor is high above everyone else. She gets the nice house, she gets the nice carriage, and she gets more money, because they're using money-based systems in this settlement instead of trade. And so it ends up showing how like corrupt this is, and how leadership can like affect the common people very strongly. And having a comparison with the other settlements like Hilltop with Maggie, who is the leader, she is practically on the same level as everyone else. She makes the decisions, however, she takes in a lot of what the people want, and she thinks for the best of the people. And so I find that contrast very interesting, because they show these two different situations with both kind of working out, but shows the good and bad for both sides, which I thought was a very interesting way to do this last series. So it was less about The Walking Dead itself. Like it wasn't really about like the zombies and like them having to survive against that, but more having to now get back to normal and survive against each other, which I think is very good, because the story has been going on for a long time. They've kind of gotten used to dealing with zombies, and they kind of can handle their own now. And so they kind of have to be like, oh, well, people, which they've kind of been doing a couple times, because you get like specific bad guys, but this time but it's always been in the context of the apocalypse. And so with this new one, it was getting back to normal, but realizing that normal actually isn't that great. Yeah, but I like it. I thought the last season was pretty decent. I thought it was a good end. It leaves off on a good note where it feels like everybody's happy and in a good place kind of stuff. And we do actually get, I'm actually not going to spoil that, because I feel like if you're going to watch the series, you should definitely check it out, and you can experience all that for yourself. But yeah, Walking Dead, solid ending. I loved it. All right, finally, The Last of Us premiere, because they've been developing a show for The Last of Us, which is a PlayStation game. It's an exclusive. It's on HBO Max. And I find it to be pretty interesting so far. There's only one episode out, and I actually have not played the game. I haven't played The Last of Us, so I don't know all the full extent of the details. I've seen clips. I've watched gameplay, because I'm a nerd and I watch YouTube videos and stuff like that. So I've seen bits and pieces, but it's been a long time since I've watched anything from the original game, or even the second one, really. So I don't know fully the extent of the story. So I may not be the best judge, but I also may be a better judge, because I have a completely independent perspective of it. I'm not biased towards a game, which is okay if you do that. I totally understand that, like really liking the source material and wanting the next project to be faithful to that source material. I think that's a good thing. And so with this, I went into it sort of blind, essentially. But I think it's good. It almost has like a similar premise to The Walking Dead, because it's zombies and stuff. And I liked that the opening scene gives you context as to why everything is happening. Because you start in like a 60s news reel, and they're like, oh, what would be our downfall? Would it like, what would really bring zombies alive? And someone was like, oh, a virus could do that. But then someone was like, no, it could be a fungus. Fungi already kind of do that in the natural world. There is a fungus that takes over ants and controls them and makes it do the fungi's bidding, which is so bizarre and strange and kind of morbid that our natural world just makes zombies on its own. But you can't really affect humans like that, unless, because our body temperatures are so high. So you would have to have an evolutionary change in fungi for them to need to be in warmer environments, and then they could then start to affect us in different kind of ways. And which is like the whole concept of The Last of Us, is like a fungi infestation that takes over everybody and turns them into these like zombies or whatever. I don't know. They have like a specific term for them in The Last of Us, I know, but I do not remember what it's called. But anyways, we have Pedro Pascal as Joel, who's one of the main characters, and then we have Bella Ramsey as Ellie, who I think is immune. Someone correct me if I am wrong, but I believe that is the case for her. So she's like super important, and they need to deliver her to like a rendezvous so that they may be able to make like a cure and try and fix this apocalypse, which I'm assuming is the case. But so the first episode is like very much exposition. They're getting the journey going. So you see Joel's previous life. He had a daughter, and she died because of a soldier and everything. And then now they're in this settlement, and Pedro is kind of like a drug lord, because he's selling drugs and stuff to get money so that they can get a truck and they can leave. They can go off on their own, and they don't have to be in this like federal settlement, because I think they just don't like the soldiers and everything being all controlling. But so in this settlement, there's a rebel group called the Fireflies. I think that's what they were called. It shows that I was paying so much attention for sure. But yeah, they're called the Fireflies, and they find Ellie and they want to deliver her. And so Joel kind of gets wrapped up because they are needing money and supplies and everything to leave. And they're like, well, if you do this, we'll give you a working car and food and water and fuel and whatever. And he's like, ugh, fine. I guess I'm going to have to do this so that I can do that. So he's kind of going into it with selfish intentions. And what I am assuming, based just on normal understanding of plot, is he's going to turn into being more like a father figure and wanting to protect Ellie and not really wanting to leave her, and they have more of a connection. But I don't know. I don't really want to watch gameplay of The Last of Us to like understand everything that's happening, because I want to just experience it all for the first time. So we're kind of like talking about this premiere so that we can kind of get in the feel for it. And then I think after all the show is out, I'll have like a more in-depth video an in-depth episode about the whole thing. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting. So far, it's an interesting show. I'm kind of excited. It's an HBO show, so it comes out weekly, which I think builds a lot more hype for shows. I'm pretty excited. So yeah, new zombie show. I'm all on it. I finished the last one, and now I'm on to The Last of Us. There we go. It all ties in together. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. I'm excited to see where it goes, and hopefully you're excited to watch it too. Hopefully we will all be easily entertained while watching this series. It's going to be great. So that's really all I have for you guys today. So I hope you did enjoy this episode of Easily Entertained. If you did, be sure to give us a like and, a follow, of course, so that you can be notified of all the latest episodes and get some good entertainment stuff. But yeah, that's all for today, and I hope you guys have a great one, and I'll see y'all next time. goodbye. Thank you for listening to Easily Entertained with me, Bryson Olson. If you enjoyed, be sure to check back in on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. We're available on Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon, and pretty much anywhere else you get your podcasts. We also have social media, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, so check out Easily Entertained on all of those to get all the latest on anything entertainment. And until next time, this is Easily Entertained. Goodbye.